I never imagined waking up one morning and staring at a face that didn't feel like mine. Yet here I was, perched on the edge of my bed, staring at the reflection in the mirror with a mix of horror, disbelief, and a strange, creeping curiosity. My hands trembled as I brought them to my cheeks, tracing the soft, unfamiliar contours. My jawline, once so sharp and undeniably masculine, was now delicately tapered, almost fragile. My eyes, wide and glimmering, seemed too large for my own comfort, framed by long, curling lashes I didn't recognize. And my lips, God, my lips were full, plump, and undeniably feminine, pink and supple as if someone had painted them while I slept. I could feel my heartbeat hammering in my chest, deafening in its insistence. Was this a dream? Had I slipped into some surreal alternate reality overnight? The rational part of my mind, the part that clung to logic and reason, was screaming that this was impossible. But the reflection staring back at me offered no lies. It was me and not me. Stephanie, I realized with a jolt. Stephanie. The name floated in my mind, soft and foreign, like it had been whispered to me by someone else, someone I didn't quite know yet. My own voice, when I tried to speak it aloud, sounded different too. Higher, softer, melodic in a way that made my stomach tighten with embarrassment and something else I couldn't yet name. I stumbled back from the mirror, clutching my chest as if the sudden shock could be physically contained. The room spun, walls tilting and breathing with a life of their own. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my throat felt alien, constricted, as though my body itself was betraying me. My hands roamed over my body, tracing curves that hadn't been there before, gentle slopes at my waist, softening hips, and a chest that rose and fell in a rhythm completely unfamiliar. Panic surged, but beneath it was something else, a flicker of fascination, a guilty curiosity that made my pulse spike in a strange, thrilling way. I collapsed onto my bed, burying my face in the pillows as sobs threatened to break free. How could this happen? I had gone to sleep the same person I had been for 28 years, and now I was this. Stephanie. A name I couldn't quite claim yet, a body I couldn't yet reconcile with. The room was silent except for my ragged breathing, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't even begin to answer. I forced myself to sit up again, eyes darting around my room as though seeking some clue, some explanation. But the room was exactly the same, my posters on the walls, my desk cluttered with papers, my laptop blinking softly. Nothing had changed except me. And yet, in that stillness, a tiny, reluctant part of me felt alive. Curious. Intrigued. I shook my head violently, trying to banish the thought, but the reflection in the mirror seemed to watch me knowingly, almost teasingly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Tentatively, I reached for my phone. My fingers felt too delicate, too soft, as though each tap might shatter the glass beneath them. I unlocked it, the familiar icons staring back at me, mundane and unchanged, yet the screen reflected the new shape of my face. I hesitated before opening the front camera, each second stretching into an eternity of dread and anticipation. And then, I gasped. There she was. Stephanie. My eyes locked onto the unfamiliar yet undeniably me face, and something inside me fractured and ignited all at once. The lips parted slightly in awe, my hands flew to my cheeks again, and I whispered her name, almost in disbelief. Stephanie, is that me? The day that followed was a blur. I couldn't leave my room. I couldn't face the world as this new me. I tried to call my friends, my family, but each time I opened my mouth, a voice that wasn't mine came out, delicate and melodic, trembling with uncertainty. Panic and exhilaration warred within me, a constant pulse of adrenaline that refused to let me rest. Every movement felt hyper-aware. My body, once second nature, now demanded attention and careful calculation. I avoided mirrors but couldn't resist sneaking glances, each one a mix of terror and wonder. By mid-morning, I found myself rifling through my closet. My old clothes, baggy jeans, loose t-shirts, jackets, hung mockingly on my transformed frame. Nothing fit. Nothing suited me. And yet, there was an irresistible allure in the idea of dressing differently, of exploring this new body with textures and fabrics I had never dared to imagine. My fingers lingered over soft fabrics, silky textures, delicate lace, and stretchy knits, each one promising a glimpse into this new identity. Tentatively, I pulled out a few items that might work, holding them against my body, feeling the way they would cling, accentuate, or flow with these unfamiliar curves. It was terrifying and intoxicating in equal measure. I caught my reflection again, this time fully facing it. My hair, longer than it had ever been, fell in soft waves around my shoulders, brushing my collarbones. My face, delicate yet strong, looked back at me with an intensity that left me breathless. I touched my lips again, marveling at their fullness, and then my chest, still unsure whether to recoil in fear or thrill at the novelty. Every inch of this body screamed femininity, and every inch of me fought against embracing it. The tension was maddening. I was trapped between two identities, the person I had always known and this stranger reflected back at me. But deep down, I couldn't deny it. There was a part of me, small, secret, ashamed even, that wanted to explore, wanted to understand, wanted to become. Hours passed like minutes as I experimented quietly, dressing and undressing, feeling fabric slide across my skin, testing my reflection in different lights, different angles. Each discovery was electric. The way a blouse softened my shoulders, how certain skirts accentuated my new hips, the way makeup could highlight or conceal, transform or exaggerate. I had never thought of myself in such terms before, but now every detail mattered, every gesture, every look in the mirror a revelation. And then came the moment of inevitable confrontation. The phone rang. My mother's name flashed across the screen. My heart froze. How could I face anyone? How could I speak? Panic clawed at my throat as I answered, my voice betraying me again, soft and undeniably Stephanie. Stephanie? Is that you? She asked, confusion and concern lacing her tone. Yes, I stammered, words trembling as I struggled to find confidence in a voice that felt borrowed. It's me, it's really me. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, yet somehow comforting. She didn't scream. She didn't faint. She didn't reject me. She just waited, letting me gather the courage to continue. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just a nightmare. This wasn't something I could sleep off or ignore. This was real. Stephanie was real. And whether I wanted it or not, she was now me. By evening, the initial shock had subsided into a tense, almost electric anticipation. I stared at my reflection one last time before bed, tracing my fingers over every curve and contour, every feature that now defined me. Fear was still there, sharp, insistent, but beneath it was something new. Curiosity. Excitement. A hunger to explore, to understand, to push boundaries I had never dared approach before. I whispered into the dimly lit room. Tomorrow I'll start discovering who I really am. And as I lay down, the reflection in the mirror seemed to smile back, knowing that this was just the beginning. The beginning of Stephanie. The beginning of a life I had never imagined, but one that was now undeniably mine. Morning light spilled through the curtains, soft and golden, painting my room with a deceptive calm. I had barely slept, turning over in bed 100 times, imagining every possible scenario for the day ahead. How could I leave my room like this? How could I face the world with a face, a body, a voice that no one recognized, not even me? Yet necessity pushed me forward. Bills didn't wait. Work didn't forgive. Life didn't pause for personal crises, no matter how surreal they became overnight. I dressed cautiously, selecting garments that balanced concealment and comfort. Jeans that were snug but not tight, a soft sweater that draped over my chest, sneakers that didn't scream femininity but didn't feel wholly masculine either. I avoided mirrors on the way out, each reflection a silent judge of a life I was still learning to inhabit. But the closer I got to the door, the louder the reality became. The world wouldn't wait for me to figure myself out. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into the unknown. I gripped the railing, trying to steady my breathing. Every ding of the floor passing beneath me made my heart skip. The lobby was empty, save for the receptionist, whose eyes flicked up at me and lingered just a second too long. Recognition didn't seem to happen, thankfully, but the subtle tilt of her head, the way her gaze measured me, was enough to set my nerves ablaze. My pulse thudded violently in my ears as I smiled awkwardly, voice higher than I expected. "Good morning," I croaked, voice foreign, trembling with uncertainty. She blinked, her brow furrowing slightly. "Morning, Stephanie." The single word sliced through me. Stephanie. It wasn't just my name now. It was a label, a persona, an identity I hadn't fully claimed but couldn't escape. I nodded quickly, forcing composure. "Yes, Stephanie." Her lips curved into a small, polite smile, but I caught the subtle hesitation in her eyes, the quiet judgment, or maybe curiosity. Every step toward the office felt like wading through invisible currents of scrutiny. People were noticing me. Maybe not consciously, maybe not all at once, but the weight of attention pressed down like a tangible force. Every whisper, every sideways glance seemed amplified, magnified, a constant reminder that nothing would ever feel normal again. The office itself was a minefield. Colleagues who had known me for years, who had joked with me, teased me, relied on me, now interacted with a stranger. Their greetings felt cautious, measured. Some avoided eye contact altogether, as if unsure whether to acknowledge the transformation that had clearly occurred. Others tried to joke, awkwardly, forcing laughter that didn't land. Every interaction was a reminder of the divide between who I was and who I had become. "Stephanie, how are you?" Mark, my closest coworker, asked, voice tight. His eyes flicked toward my face, then back to his computer screen, unwilling to meet mine fully. I'm fine," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. But the words felt like lies. Inside, I was a hurricane of anxiety, confusion, and a strange, secret thrill that I couldn't admit even to myself. My hands fidgeted, brushing the edge of my sweater, a gesture meant to ground me, but instead amplifying my self-consciousness. The day stretched endlessly, each minute packed with minor disasters. Sitting in meetings, I became hyper-aware of how my body occupied space differently. The sway of my hips when I crossed my legs, the softness of my hands as they gestured, the pitch of my voice, all foreign, all scrutinized. Each glance from a colleague felt like a spotlight, exposing every uncertainty. Lunch hour was a nightmare. The cafeteria became a theater of judgmental stares. I felt eyes tracking my every move, whispers fluttering just beyond comprehension. Was someone commenting on my appearance? My body language? My voice? Every bite of food felt like an audition, every sip of coffee a test I couldn't fail. Then came the unavoidable encounters with friends and family. My mother, of course, was shocked but restrained. Her love had shielded her initial reactions, but the tension lingered like static electricity. My best friend, Julia, tried to joke, her laughter nervous and forced. "Wow, Stephanie, you look different." "Really different," she said, eyes wide, voice tight. Different. That word reverberated through me like a hammer. I wanted to scream, to cry, to laugh, to disappear all at once. Different. That was all I was to them. A stranger who shared my past, but not my present. Not yet. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion settled into my bones. Mentally, emotionally, physically, I was drained. Each step, each conversation, each glance was a negotiation with a world that refused to pause, a world that saw me and yet didn't understand me. And yet, there was an undeniable, electric thrill beneath the fatigue. The way people noticed me, the way subtle reactions made my heart race, it was terrifying, yes, but also intoxicating. Part of me craved the attention, craved the acknowledgement of this new, uncharted identity. I felt a dangerous mix of shame and exhilaration, shame that I enjoyed it, and exhilaration that I couldn't deny. Work ended with a relief, so profound it was almost physical. I escaped to the relative safety of my apartment, collapsing onto the couch. I didn't even remove my shoes before burying my face in my hands. My chest heaved with the weight of the day, my mind replaying every glance, every whispered comment, every subtle reaction. And yet, in that flood of emotion, a single, undeniable thought emerged. I was changing. Not just physically, not just socially, but internally, in ways I couldn't yet articulate. The next days repeated the cycle, each outing, each interaction, a mixture of dread and excitement. Grocery stores became arenas of scrutiny. Strangers' glances followed me like invisible chains. Even casual conversations felt charged, every smile or nod weighted with unspoken commentary. And yet I was learning. Slowly, painfully, I was beginning to navigate this new existence. Learning how to move, how to speak, how to inhabit the space my transformed body demanded. I discovered small victories that brought fleeting joy. A barista complimented my hair, her tone casual but sincere. My coworker, hesitant at first, laughed genuinely at a joke I made, acknowledging Stephanie without fear. Each tiny acknowledgement was electric, a spark of confidence that began to stitch together the frayed edges of my identity. I realized that survival in this new life wasn't just about concealment, it was about claiming space, claiming recognition, forcing the world to see me as I was now. And yet, the fear never fully dissipated. The whispers, the stares, the subtle judgments, they followed me like shadows, persistent, unavoidable. My reflection in mirrors outside my apartment reminded me daily that this was permanent, that this was reality. The world hadn't shifted, hadn't changed. It was I who had moved into unfamiliar territory, learning new rules, new behaviors, new ways of being. And while I stumbled, faltered, and recoiled at times, I began to realize something essential. I had power here. Power in my appearance, in my presence, in the way the world now responded to me. And that realization, raw and frightening as it was, planted the first seed of something thrilling, possibility. By the end of the week, I was exhausted, emotionally raw, yet there was a subtle shift within me. The initial shock had evolved into a tense awareness, a cautious understanding of how Stephanie moved through the world. Each glance, each whisper, each fleeting smile from a stranger or acquaintance was a clue, a thread I could follow to learn how to inhabit this life. And as I collapsed into bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized with startling clarity, the world would never treat me the same way again, and maybe, just maybe, I didn't want it to. The transformation was more than skin deep. It was a collision of identity, perception, and desire, leaving me raw, vulnerable, and fiercely alive. And deep down, beneath the fear, the confusion, and the relentless scrutiny, a single, electrifying thought pulsed in my chest. Stephanie was no longer just a reflection in the mirror. She was becoming real, and I was terrified and exhilarated to meet her. After another long day of navigating the world as Stephanie, I retreated to the sanctuary of my bedroom. My apartment had never felt more like a refuge and more like a cage at the same time. Here, behind closed doors, I could finally explore the person I was becoming without judgment or scrutiny. The moment the lock clicked behind me, a sense of freedom and a pulse of adrenaline flooded through me. No one was watching. No one was expecting. No one could see the tremor of anticipation running down my spine. This was my time. I stood before my full-length mirror, the one I had avoided during the first few days. Now, the reflection didn't shock me as sharply. It intrigued me. Stephanie stared back, eyes wide, lips full, hair cascading down her shoulders in soft waves. I traced my hands along my arms, over my newly sloping shoulders, down the gentle curves of my waist. Every touch sparked awareness. This body was mine now, even if my mind still wrestled with disbelief. And I couldn't help but smile, a small, secretive curve of lips that felt daring and vulnerable at the same time. My clothes were the first playground. The sweaters and jeans I had worn to blend in at work now felt like armor I didn't need here. Tentatively, I reached for something different, a soft, silky blouse I had never dared wear. The fabric slipped over my arms like liquid, cool and smooth against my skin. I shivered at the sensation, goosebumps racing along my spine. The blouse emphasized the gentle swell of my chest, the delicate slope of my shoulders. I caught myself in the mirror, turning, studying the way the fabric moved with me. Every angle revealed something new: the curve of my hips, the way my hair framed my face, the subtle power of femininity I had never imagined for myself. Next came the skirt, a short, pleated number that brushed mid-thigh, soft and light. I hesitated, heart pounding at the thought of how it revealed the contours of my legs and hips. Sliding it on, I felt a strange exhilaration, a flutter in my chest that was almost impossible to describe. It wasn't just clothing, it was a tool, a medium, a mask, and a mirror all in one. With each garment, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was discovering, experimenting, sculpting Stephanie from fragments of curiosity and desire. Makeup was a revelation. I had always envied it from afar but never dared touch it myself. Now, standing in front of my vanity, brushes in hand, I felt both nervous and electric. The foundation was first, a smooth, creamy veil that evened my complexion and hid subtle shadows of my past self. Then, eyeshadow, soft pinks, shimmering golds, colors I had never imagined on me, each sweep of the brush transforming my gaze. My hands shook slightly as I applied eyeliner, tracing delicate lines along my lashes. The final touch was lipstick, deep rose, bold, and arresting. I pressed my lips together, watching them become fuller, more defined, more me. Stephanie, I reminded myself silently. This is you. The mirror didn't just reflect a face anymore. It reflected a story, a journey, a person in the midst of creation. I experimented with expressions, tilting my head, smiling softly, pursing my lips, arching an eyebrow. Each gesture felt like a secret conversation with the world, a rehearsal for encounters that were both inevitable and terrifying. And with each pose, each glance, each shift of posture, I felt a surge of exhilaration, a thrill that mixed danger and delight in equal measure. I began to explore my voice in the privacy of my room. Speaking aloud, I tested different pitches, intonations, cadences. Soft, melodic tones rolled off my tongue naturally, yet each word carried a hint of tension. Could I laugh without flinching? Could I sigh, whisper, or sing and hear Stephanie in the sound? Hours passed as I practiced, repeating phrases, experimenting with inflections, recording myself and listening, critiquing, adjusting. Every success was a small victory, every misstep a lesson. Slowly, I felt control growing, not over my body alone, but over how the world would eventually hear me, perceive me, respond to me. Then came the small, private rituals that made the transformation feel alive. I practiced walking in heels, initially with trepidation, wobbly and unsure. My first tentative steps sent shivers up my legs, the click of heels on wood echoing in my empty apartment. Each stride became more confident, deliberate, controlled. I experimented with gestures, the tilt of my head, the sway of my hips, the curve of my fingers. Stephanie wasn't just in the mirror. She was moving, breathing, inhabiting the space with a presence that was subtle yet undeniable. Curiosity drove me further. I experimented with hairstyles, braiding, curling, brushing, letting strands fall in front of my face or tucking them behind my ears. Each style changed not just my appearance, but my perception of myself. I marveled at the transformative power of such simple acts, how something as small as a twist of hair could shift my entire demeanor. In these moments, alone and unobserved, I felt the first whispers of empowerment, a flicker that hinted at possibilities I had never dared to imagine. I didn't stop there. My exploration extended to my behavior, my movements, even my thoughts. I practiced subtle changes in posture, in the way I held my arms, the tilt of my shoulders. I experimented with softer gestures, gentle touches, the languid motions I had seen others perform effortlessly. Every reflection, every movement, was both a mirror and a guide, teaching me Stephanie's rhythms, her poise, her unspoken confidence. And with each experiment, I felt a strange, thrilling liberation. Freedom from the rigid identity I had known, the chance to explore a self I had never truly met. Hours slipped away unnoticed as I moved through this private world of discovery. Sometimes I laughed at myself, sometimes I cried in frustration at the awkwardness, the uncertainty, the dissonance between old habits and new forms. But always, beneath the frustration, there was a current of exhilaration, a sense that I was creating something beautiful and potent, a new self, fully embodied, ready to confront the world in a way that was wholly, unapologetically me. By late evening, I collapsed onto the bed, exhausted yet alive. My body ached from the hours of experimenting, posing, practicing, but my mind buzzed with possibilities. Stephanie was no longer just a reflection in the mirror. She was a presence, a voice, a persona beginning to assert itself. And in the quiet, dimly lit room, I realized something profound. I had survived the shock, endured the scrutiny, navigated the awkwardness of daily life. But this private exploration, this intimate rehearsal, was where the real transformation lived. I whispered to my reflection one last time before sleep, a vow and a question intertwined. Tomorrow, I will see how far I can take this, how far I can become me. And as the lights dimmed, the image in the mirror seemed to respond, a gentle, knowing smile, a promise of secrets yet to be discovered, and a life yet to be fully lived. The first step outside my apartment that weekend felt like stepping into a parallel universe. The air was crisp, carrying the faint aroma of freshly baked bread and city streets coming alive with weekend energy. My reflection in the hallway mirror caught me before I even reached the door. Stephanie, poised, deliberate, yet still trembling with anticipation. I adjusted the collar of my blouse, smoothed a stray wave of hair, and took a deep breath, trying to anchor myself. Today wasn't just a walk to the corner store. Today was a test, a small experiment in public, a rehearsal for a life that could no longer hide behind closed doors. The first few steps onto the street were electric. Every passerby, every glance, every fleeting expression felt magnified. I noticed subtle reactions. A double take from a man walking his dog, a quiet whisper between two women waiting at the bus stop, a fleeting smile from a teenager who barely registered my existence. Each reaction sent a shiver through me, a cocktail of fear, exhilaration, and something dangerously close to pride. Stephanie was no longer confined to mirrors or my private bedroom. She was moving, breathing, living, and the world was taking notice. Coffee shops became arenas of subtle observation. I entered a small cafe downtown, the bell above the door chiming delicately. My steps felt measured, practiced, elegant yet cautious. The barista glanced up and smiled warmly, the familiarity of a routine interaction layered with a curious newness in her gaze. "Morning. What can I get you today?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. I hesitated, tasting the higher, softer tone of my voice as I responded, "Hi. I'll have a cappuccino, please." The words felt strange, yet liberating as they left my lips. She smiled again, nodding, and I felt an unexpected thrill. It was a small victory, a confirmation that Stephanie could exist outside the privacy of my apartment, that she could navigate the world without collapse. Seating myself by the window, I watched people pass, observing their casual interactions, their gestures, their glances. I realized that much of my life before this transformation had been invisible. Now, each subtle look, each ripple of attention, was a mirror reflecting Stephanie back at me. And the attention, once terrifying, was gradually transforming into empowerment. I was learning to inhabit this new identity not just physically but socially, emotionally. I experimented with gestures, small nuances of movement that felt natural in this feminine form. Crossing my legs in a skirt, adjusting my posture while seated, letting my fingers trace patterns absent-mindedly along the edge of the table. Each motion was an unspoken communication of identity. And with each gesture, each adjustment, I felt a growing confidence, a sense of control over how the world perceived me. Lunch was another test. I met a friend I hadn't seen since the transformation. Her initial reaction was shock, but it quickly gave way to curiosity and, surprisingly, acceptance. "Stephanie, wow. You look incredible," she breathed, eyes wide, studying me as if I were a rare painting. I laughed nervously, the sound light and melodic, and felt a rush of warmth and relief. The conversation was tentative at first, filled with awkward pauses and careful phrasing. But as I grew more comfortable, I noticed a subtle shift in her behavior. She leaned in slightly, her tone softer, more intimate. The way she spoke, the way she gestured, the way she reacted, all were subtle signals that Stephanie was no longer just a reflection in a mirror. She was an active presence, commanding acknowledgement and interaction. Afternoon errands pushed me further. The grocery store, usually mundane, became a field of delicate negotiations. How would people react to Stephanie browsing the aisles? Would they whisper, stare, question? Each encounter was a tightrope walk, and I navigated it with a mix of trepidation and thrill. A kind smile from an older woman, a polite nod from a man at the checkout counter, even the casual glance from a cashier. All tiny affirmations that Stephanie could exist, that I could exist, fully, outside the safety of home. There were missteps, too, moments of acute embarrassment. A poorly chosen gesture, a slip of tone, a look of confusion from a stranger. Each sent a jolt of panic through me. But I learned quickly. Each mistake was a lesson, a map guiding me through the intricate terrain of social interaction as Stephanie. I discovered resilience, the ability to recover, to adjust, to persist. And with each recovery, confidence bloomed quietly but insistently, like a flower forcing its way through concrete. Evenings brought another layer of experimentation, nightlife. I ventured to a small lounge, the dim lights and soft music providing a perfect backdrop for observing, interacting, testing boundaries. Here, Stephanie could push limits, exploring flirtation, attention, and subtle social power in ways I had never experienced. I noticed men and women alike glancing, occasionally lingering, and I felt the intoxicating mix of fear and exhilaration spike through me. It was empowering to see the world respond differently, to realize that identity could shift perception in profound, tangible ways. I learned the art of subtle seduction, not in a sexual sense necessarily, but in the way presence, posture, voice, and gaze could command attention, inspire curiosity, elicit smiles. Each interaction was a puzzle, each reaction a clue, and Stephanie was slowly becoming adept at navigating this complex social dance. The thrill of mastery, even in small increments, was intoxicating, addictive. By the end of the weekend, exhaustion was tempered by exhilaration. Stephanie had ventured beyond the safety of mirrors and closed doors. She had tested the waters, discovered nuances, experienced the world anew. Each glance, each reaction, each subtle acknowledgement from strangers or friends reinforced a simple truth. This identity was not just a mask. It was real, tangible, alive. I returned home, flushed with the thrill of the day, and collapsed onto my bed. My body was tired from movement, my mind buzzing with observation, reflection, and anticipation. But beneath it all, a fierce, electric pulse of empowerment coursed through me. Stephanie was no longer just a reflection, a secret, a tentative experiment. She was alive. She existed. She was powerful in ways I had never known, and each day, each interaction, each carefully practiced gesture brought her closer to being fully, unapologetically real. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I realized something profound. The world had changed, yes, but I had changed more. Fear was still present, uncertainty still lingered, but the thrill of possibility, the intoxicating power of discovery, outweighed it. Stephanie was not merely surviving. Stephanie was beginning to thrive. And tomorrow, the exploration would continue, pushing boundaries further, testing limits, embracing the unknown. The tension had been building for days, Each interaction a silent test, each glance a subtle gauge of how the world would react. I had grown confident, more confident than I ever imagined, but confidence is fragile, and the world is relentless. Nothing could prepare me for the moment it all collided. It began with a call from work, unexpected and urgent. My heart sank as I listened to my boss's clipped instructions, a last-minute meeting downtown in person with several clients. Panic surged immediately. Downtown was crowded, full of strangers, full of scrutiny. My carefully rehearsed routines, my practiced voice, my subtle gestures, everything was about to be tested in the harshest environment yet. I dressed meticulously, choosing an outfit that balanced professionalism with Stephanie's emerging style. A fitted blazer over a soft blouse, a pencil skirt that accentuated my curves without overstepping boundaries, and modest heels. I applied makeup with precision, each stroke deliberate, each contour, highlight, and sweep of color a layer of armor. The reflection in the mirror stared back confidently, but inside, my stomach churned with anticipation and fear. The subway ride was a gauntlet. Every glance, every whisper, every accidental brush of shoulders amplified my awareness of Stephanie's presence in the world. A man's stare lingered longer than comfort allowed. A group of young women giggled as they passed, heads turning subtly. I pressed my bag to my chest, adjusted my posture, and forced a calm smile. Each small victory, a returned glance, a polite nod, an acknowledgement of existence, was a pulse of power. But nothing could fully shield me from what awaited at the office. Entering the building, I froze. My reflection in the polished glass doors confirmed what I already knew. Stephanie existed, yes, but scrutiny waited. My boss met me at the elevator, and I saw surprise flicker across his face, quickly masked by professional composure. "Stephanie, you look different," he muttered, voice tight, almost faltering. "Yes," I said firmly, voice steady. "I am Stephanie now." His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed as he processed the declaration.
"Right.
Well, let's get to the meeting." The meeting room was filled with clients and colleagues. Each step toward the table felt like crossing a battlefield. Whispers rippled through the room, some subtle, some unavoidable. I felt the eyes on me, judging, questioning, evaluating. Every instinct screamed to shrink, to revert, to hide the identity that now pulsed vividly through my body. But I didn't. I took my seat, shoulders back, chin high, voice measured but confident. Each word I spoke, each gesture I made, carried the weight of Stephanie fully embodied. I noticed the shifts in the room. Clients leaning in, colleagues exchanging subtle nods, some impressed, some wary. The moment of confrontation wasn't just verbal, it was social, emotional, psychological. I was Stephanie in totality, and the room had to respond. Then came the unavoidable question. One client, bold and blunt, leaned forward, curiosity overtaking politeness. "Stephanie, this is new. Are you comfortable with this? I mean, with yourself?" The words struck like a hammer. Comfortable. With myself. For a moment, panic threatened to rise, to shatter the fragile confidence I had built. But I remembered the hours in my bedroom, the endless practice, the subtle victories of the past week. I drew in a deep breath, letting the voice I had cultivated for Stephanie flow naturally. "Yes," I said, firm, clear, unwavering. "I am Stephanie, and I am exactly who I need to be." A silence followed, electric and charged. Then slowly the room shifted. Nods, subtle smiles, the acknowledgement of my presence without question or hesitation. The confrontation, I realized, wasn't about hiding or retreating. It was about claiming space, asserting identity, and refusing to apologize for being visible. Stephanie had arrived, fully formed, and the world had no choice but to recognize her. After the meeting, the hallway became another stage. I encountered colleagues I hadn't seen since the transformation. Some stared, some whispered, some avoided me. But this time, the fear that had once gripped me was absent. I held my head high, voice steady, smile confident. Every glance I returned, every nod I offered, reinforced the reality. Stephanie was not temporary, not experimental, not fragile. She was real. Later that evening, as I walked home, the city lights glinting off wet streets, I reflected on the confrontation. The day had tested every skill, every lesson, every ounce of courage I had cultivated. And I had survived. More than survived. I had thrived. The fear of discovery had been replaced by a recognition of power, by the realization that Stephanie's existence was not a threat, not a mistake, but a force. Yet, the confrontation was not limited to strangers or colleagues. At home, the mirror awaited, reflecting not just face and body, but choices, identity, and future paths. Could I revert? Could I retreat to the old, familiar self? The answer was no. Every experience, every small victory, every interaction had forged something unbreakable. Stephanie was no longer a tentative experiment. She was fully realized, commanding the space around her, shaping perceptions, defining reality. By nightfall, exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. I collapsed onto my bed, mind buzzing, body alive with adrenaline, heart pounding with a mix of relief, pride, and anticipation. The confrontation had been complete, not just with the world, but with myself. The choice had been made, consciously or not. Stephanie would no longer hide. Stephanie would no longer falter. Stephanie would be unapologetically, irrevocably real. And as I stared at the ceiling, whispering to the reflection in the mirror, I realized the truth that had been building for days. The transformation was no longer about fear or confusion. It was about power, agency, and the thrilling, terrifying beauty of embracing who I truly was. Stephanie had faced the world, and the world had recognized her. The days following the confrontation at work felt different. Each morning, I woke not with fear, but with anticipation, a quiet, steady thrill at the thought of moving through the world as Stephanie. The mirror no longer held a stranger. It reflected someone I knew, someone I had fought to understand, someone I was proud to see. Each curve, each line, each soft wave of hair had become familiar, intimate and powerful. At first, there were subtle victories. Small interactions with neighbors, friends, even strangers, became affirmations of identity rather than sources of anxiety. I noticed how people's behavior changed around me, not because of some magic, but because I had changed. My posture, my voice, my confidence, they all radiated outward, shifting perceptions and interactions in ways I had never imagined. Stephanie was not just seen, she was acknowledged, respected, and even admired. One afternoon, I attended a social gathering, a small, casual dinner at a friend's apartment. Normally, such events would have filled me with dread, each interaction a potential minefield of judgment. But this time, I entered with a quiet assurance. I dressed deliberately, choosing a fitted dress that highlighted my figure and a pair of heels that elevated both my stature and my confidence. Makeup was subtle but polished, accentuating my features without overwhelming them. And as I walked into the room, every glance that flicked toward me, every whisper that passed, was met with Stephanie's steady, unflinching gaze. The reactions were immediate. Friends who had known me in my previous life stared, caught between surprise and admiration. A few attempted jokes, awkwardly, but the awkwardness belonged only to them. I had rehearsed, practiced, and embodied Stephanie so thoroughly that there was no hesitation, no faltering. Every word I spoke, every gesture I made, carried a quiet power. Laughter came easily, smiles were genuine, and interactions flowed with a natural ease I had never known. By the time the evening wound down, I realized something profound. Empowerment was not just about being seen. It was about being fully present, fully authentic, fully unafraid to occupy space in the world. Stephanie was no longer a tentative experiment. She was alive, vibrant, and fully integrated into the rhythm of life around her. Work, too, became a landscape of subtle power. Meetings, once terrifying, were now stages where I could assert presence, articulate ideas, and command attention effortlessly. Colleagues no longer reacted with hesitant curiosity. They engaged with Stephanie as a peer, a professional, a force to be reckoned with. And with each interaction, my confidence grew, cementing the transformation not just externally, but internally. Yet, empowerment was not merely about external recognition. It was also about self-acceptance. Alone in my apartment, I allowed myself moments of reflection, deep, unflinching acknowledgement of the journey I had undertaken. The shock, the fear, the awkward experiments, the public trials, they had all led to this point. Stephanie had emerged not as a mask, but as a fully realized identity, one that harmonized body, mind, and spirit. I could feel her strength, her resilience, her beauty resonating in every movement, every thought, every heartbeat. I began to explore passions and hobbies I had previously ignored, drawn now to things that resonated with Stephanie's emerging identity. Fashion, makeup, social interactions, even creative pursuits, each became a medium through which I expressed myself fully. The thrill of creation, the satisfaction of mastery, the joy of self-expression, these were the rewards of embracing change, of stepping into a persona that was not imposed, but chosen, cultivated, and celebrated. Even intimate moments became richer, more profound. The way I experienced touch, the way I related to others, the way I navigated social and emotional connections, all were heightened by Stephanie's awareness and confidence. There was power in vulnerability, strength in openness, and beauty in authenticity. Each day was a new chapter, each interaction an opportunity to assert presence, each reflection a testament to survival, growth, and transformation. By the end of the week, Stephanie was not just a persona, I was her fully, irrevocably. Fear had diminished, replaced by exhilaration. In mirrors, in photographs, in the eyes of others, I saw not a reflection of the past, but a promise of the future. Every hesitation, every trembling step, every private experiment had forged a resilience that radiated outward. I was no longer negotiating my identity. I was celebrating it. One evening, as the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, I stood by the window, gazing at the city below. The streets teemed with life, strangers moving through their routines, oblivious to the personal revolutions occurring in apartments above, in offices, in cafes. And yet, I felt a connection, a sense of harmony, a quiet assertion that Stephanie existed fully, vibrantly, undeniably. The journey had been tumultuous, emotional, and at times terrifying. But in the end, it had led to empowerment. I whispered to my reflection, soft but unwavering, I am Stephanie. I am real. I am strong. I am beautiful. And I am free. The reflection smiled back, not a stranger, not a figment, but me. Fully, unmistakably me. And for the first time since the transformation began, I felt complete. Not perfect, not invulnerable, but authentically, unapologetically alive. Stephanie had survived, grown, and emerged stronger. And in her emergence, I realized the ultimate truth. Transformation is not just about the body, or even identity. It is about courage, resilience, and the willingness to embrace oneself fully, without apology or hesitation. And as the city lights flickered on one by one, I knew with quiet certainty, this was only the beginning. Stephanie would continue to evolve, to explore, to thrive, and nothing, no fear, no judgment, no limitation, could ever take that away.